Good morning, it's November 12th. This is To My Liberal Friends. I didn't have a podcast yesterday because I was traveling home from a funeral for my sister-in-law. Well, anyway, the shutdown of the government's about to end and the American public can take a sigh of relief. 8 Democrats in the Senate broke with the caucus and forged a compromise with John Thune, the Republican Majority Leader. The bill will be voted on the House tonight, and I expect it to get the votes necessary to pass. I also expect each and every Democrat to vote no. Not because they think reopening the government is something that shouldn't be done, but because they fear the politics of retribution from the left wing of the party. President Trump signaled his support for the bill, which would make it very difficult for conservatives in the House to try and block the bill. But what this has done is further divide the Democrats in Washington, who after winning some elections last week in what we have to say is blue states, were on the offensive to keep up the fight. And after this small group of senators made the deal, providing the votes necessary to end their own party's filibuster, liberals fumed that the centrists gave way to store without anything in return. The frustrations were only fueled by the results of last week's off-year elections, which gave Democrats, I'm being honest, some victories across the country, and suggested to those in the left wing of the party that voters wanted them to continue fighting for these health care subsidies. But the centrists realized they were not going to get what the Democrats were demanding with the government shutdown, and the longer it stayed shut down, the more people were being affected. Led by such left-wing members like Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren, they denounced the compromise as caving in. The criticisms also came from liberal activist groups, which have accused Democrats of not fighting hard enough against Trump since his return to the White House this year. That's all they want, fight against Trump. Quote, "We cannot afford a divided and weak opposition party with an authoritarian that is invading our cities, terrorizing our communities, and corruptly self-enriching at the expense of the rest of us." End quote. That came from Ezra Levin, the co-founder and co-executive director of Indivisible. And he said in a statement after the deal was announced, quote, "We hope to celebrate the Democratic Party for fighting back, but if they surrender, the next step is primaries and new leadership." End quote. That's what's going to go on in the Democratic Party. Usama Andrabi, a spokesman for Justice Democrats, said the move by the Senate Democrats was, quote, "an absolute failure. Voters expected their leaders to hold the line for their basic health care needs, and instead a handful of corporate Democrats surrendered to the GOP to let them raise premiums for millions of people." End quote. That's exactly why we need Democratic primaries, he said, nationwide to build an opposition party that actually fights for working people, not selling the American people out when they get too tired to work for them. End quote. That's a lot of rhetoric. Well, you can now expect calls for the Democratic leadership in the Senate to be replaced by the left-wing side of the party, but it shows they're more interested in power than in solving the problems facing the nation. While we're already wild talk in progressive circles of primarying the traitors who caved and spoiled the good vibes emanating from the Democratic electoral sweep last week, this is a fairly predictable development. Again, absent a Trump intervention, that looked increasingly unlikely. Democrats were not going to win on the ObamaCare subsidies, and some of them privately hoped they wouldn't, since bipartisan solution might take the issue off the table for the midterms. They wanted to run on this. They would have kept the government shut down till then. But now the Democrats find themselves split in half and rudderless. Many will vent their anger at Schumer, and there will be calls for retribution against those that voted to end the shutdown, as I've said. It only splinters the Democratic Party further, and it leads to further polarization of the American political system, and that's not a good thing. What is going to happen shortly after the Thanksgiving recess? The Senate will come back in, and per the agreement with Thune, will take up the health care issue. The problem for the Democrats when that occurs is that all the problems of Obamacare will be laid bare to the public. You do not hear Democrats talking about people with incomes between $200,000 and $400,000 receiving subsidies. Most people would be shocked about that. You do not hear them talk about people with millions in assets, but keeping their income below a certain level, able to get subsidies. They don't want you to know that either. Did you hear the Democrats mention almost 200,000 complaints filed about unscrupulous insurance agents enrolling people without their knowledge to simply gain the commission? And now make no mistake, there are only a few of the problems with the Obamacare system, and maybe, just maybe, both parties will now find a way to reform the program and make it more effective for the users and save taxpayer dollars at the same time. What I hope will happen is a full examination of the system of Obamacare. It's not going away, but it needs to be reformed. It hasn't delivered what it promised. It needs to find solutions to ensure that those that are in true need of assistance get that help. But it also needs to weed out the largesse that hands out tax credits to people with significant incomes and assets. It needs to aggressively attack the corruption within the insurance industry, where unscrupulous agents are taking advantage of lack of oversight. If all this occurs, then perhaps something good will come out of this record-breaking shutdown. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.